It's for next week, so that I didn't have to grab it.
That's right. Thank you.
Should be good.
Okay, I'm going to call to order the January 27th, 2023 meeting of the Harwich Conservation Commission at 2 p.m. at the small meeting room at Harwich Town Hall. So I have a couple comments, if I may, just about organizing the meeting. Having gone through as best I could all the material that we have here. There's a lot of moving parts here and complicated issues to discuss. I personally don't expect we're going to get through it all and have any real decisions today. I assume nobody else is expecting that as well. But I think it's important to try to establish goals, have an organized meeting, and set some time limits as well. And I'm suggesting we agree to be done in 2 hours for the day. So I want to talk about specific goals, but first let's hear what other people have to say about any of that, and maybe Amy, you can talk about what you're expecting from this meeting.
Sure. Well, in advance of this meeting, I put together, it's probably not completely comprehensive, but from my recollection, updates that since we adopted the land management plan for the Bells Neck Conservation Area in 2012, so it's been just over 10 years, hard to believe. So since 2012, because in that document, it had talked about what we've done, what we should do, things like that. So here are the things that since 2012 that we've been working on, and just things that I noted along the way. And I'm happy to go through them if it's worth it, or you do have it in document form here. There seems to have been an interest by this board to have a meeting like this. In 2020, the Conservation Commission then was focused mainly on the management of the Cranberry Bog area at the entrance to Depot Street and how to manage that area once that lease had been up, or that lease had been abandoned. And after a year and a half to 2 years of discussion, the commission voted to do, what do we call it? Gradual bog naturalization, and that's in the document that I sent you, that I said was document from March 2020. And we had said at that time that we would work towards reviewing the Bells Neck Land Management Plan in its entirety, including how that strategy that we've selected is going. So in terms of, I kind of view Bells Neck in a couple of parts, personally. I look at the land management that we do in the majority of the Bells Neck, with the trails, the roadways, things like that. And then Fish Passage is this whole other piece of things. And tied along with that, in ways, is the management of the old bog areas and the road around it. And hopefully eventually that piece will just become part of the whole land management piece for the entire bog. So I think for the land management plan, it needs to be updated to include that area. And we need to look at the goals that we had set for ourselves, see if they're still goals that we want to keep, as well as any new goals that we want to accomplish.
So, my suggestion is that we talk about the document that you labeled document from March 2020, which is the alternatives, which we voted on. Do you remember when we voted on this?
March.
It was in March.
thought it was November 4th, 2020.
Okay, it was after
That
that.
might have been the vote.
Um, But, so, we just discussed that and try to come to some conclusion about that and its role in the bigger picture. Just come to an agreement if we can. Hopefully, we can come to an agreement easily about that. If not, and discussion is required, it seems like that's like high on the list of things we ought to be doing today. Then things get a little more wide open. And one of the things that strikes me is that there were a lot of recommendations which weren't necessarily consolidated neatly in the report from 2011, is that when it was? But it seems to me that we ought to be going through that report and assessing where we are with every one of those recommendations. I don't think that's something we can finish today, but we ought to at least start talking about it and come to some agreement about how that's going to be done, what the process is. Because if we're going to update the land management plan, we have to know where we are with the land management, which I don't think we have a handle on.
Part of what my update was,
Right.
not all of it, but what we can do is edit the existing one, and we can go through, because I've been here for the entire, and Brad actually too has been here for the entirety of this process. I started when the land management plan went into place. I started in 2011. So we can go through and update what we've done and for those goals. At least let you know what has been done, what hasn't been done, things like that.
So there's reviewing this document here in this meeting, going through each point, and there's reviewing this other document and coming to some agreement. My preference is to start
Yep.
with the BOG document and try to drive to a conclusion today about where we are with that and how to integrate it into the overall land management plan, and then move on to this list. And that's probably plenty to do today. But do we have any other comments?
Yeah, if I may, I feel like, you know, the process is going very slowly, and I think we're almost stepping back. I was hoping today we could make more progress with the actual land management plan. And so that was kind of a discussion last time we met, was that, you know, we had comments put forth on that plan, and I hope folks would, you know, review that and come today to talk about that. So I think the discussion you're suggesting is going to be useful because we have new members here.
Right.
But also I feel like we're, you know, we're stepping back a little bit. 2019 was when the commission voted to update the plan. So it was, you know, a few years ago. And so I have edited the plan, have folks review that and come to talk about that today.
I reviewed the plan.
Yeah.
I've reviewed the plan. I don't know that I've reviewed your edit of the plan.
I think you sent it to everybody.
I sent an editable version. Did you send me your edits?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, a month ago, over a month ago.
Oh,
And I thought you sent it out to
I
everybody.
probably did a month
Yeah.
ago. I didn't
Yeah.
resend it.
Yeah. You know, we've been
Okay,
talking
so-
under discussion in
Yeah.
recent, you know, say the last few months about updates on these different discussion items we have. And when we've talked about that, we've talked about editing and updating that plan. And so I pledged to get folks a plan edited a month,
Mhm.
and that was, I delivered on that, then I thought it went out. I thought you sent it out to
We
everybody.
did.
Yeah.
I do remember that, but I
So-
should have put it in the Dropbox for today too. But
So I'm fine, John, if we go back as you suggest, but I also, you know, this has been discussed an awful lot by this commission. And so I hope we can make some progress.
I absolutely agree with you, and one of the issues we've been at this, you know, since 2019, which is sort of the beginning, near the beginning of my involvement with the Conservation Commission, and it's been a very diffuse process because we've been so distracted with the daily business of the Conservation Commission. I absolutely agree with you. We need to make progress. This is what I'm trying to do. This is my intent about well, wait a minute, let me go back for a minute. Part of the diffuse nature is evidenced by the fact that we don't all have your edited version of the file. And I think I got it in email, but I got it in email months ago, so when I go back looking for things in email, it's just, and I assume everybody else has the same problem. It's just hard to keep track of all these
understand.
threads. And it wasn't in the Dropbox, so one of the things we have to pay attention to is trying to keep all these pieces together and in one place so that we all are referring to the same material. So maybe we can modify my suggestion, but I still think that part of the overall update of the land management plan is to have what we agreed on about the bogs specifically in that land management plan. And since that has been a matter of discussion, I just wanted to come to some agreement up front that we're putting option 2 into the land management plan. I think it's option 2. Yes, option 2.
I agree, we should.
And we just need to clarify that, get that done with. And if there's further discussion and a vote is required or something, we need to do that just up front and not let that issue sort of
Sure.
drag along. That was my motivation. And if instead of going through Amy's document, you want to step through your copy with your updates and talk about each one, let's talk about doing that. That's complicated if we don't all have that in front of us.
Yeah.
But
Well, to make things simple, John, I took option 1 as we voted on,
option 2?
option 2, and I inserted it into the editable version. So it's going to be there with almost no change. And so, so that's done.
All right.
And, I kind of hope that people would have gone through that before this meeting, but that's all right. We can do it now. I think that,
So, well, rather than me asking questions, because I have lots of them, maybe we should go around and see what other comments other people have about just this from the top point of view. Mark, do you have any comments?
Sure. It's no secret that we haven't agreed on the management of the bogs there for quite some time. And I have not been a supporter of naturalizing that area. My feeling was always that there should have been some cranberry production trying to be preserved there. I will agree that portions of it could be let go. But even at this time, the center bog still has potential if somebody wanted to put the effort into it. And I'm not in support of letting that go by the wayside. I think that should be held as an option, at least for the time being. We're probably not going to agree on the outcome of that, and so be it. However, more important to me is the bigger picture of the entire area. And I have much more concern about issues at the east end of the reservoir than the west end. And there's really quite a list of things there that need to be addressed. And there needs to be some pretty significant planning to bring that to fruition and to get it to some fashion of sensible resolution. Right now, there's a number of issues there that I think should be addressed, and because of, what's the easiest way to say that? People working with what they have to work with is the result of where it is now. Not that it's been bad, but resources are limited at multiple levels. So the result is what you've got today. That's the end result.
Are you saying that specifically in the context of the east end of the reservoir, or are you just?
Yes,
Mean Bell's Neck Road?
correct.
Okay.
Okay. To elaborate, the grading of the road, the elevations, the drainage, stockpiling of road material that's there, a lot of the stuff we wouldn't permit anywhere else. And here it is, right in the heart of that area, and all of these issues are not addressed. And it's not that DPW is doing anything wrong. They're working with what they've got to work with. It would require some direction and instruction and dedication and some funding to go through and prioritize and correct the issues that need to be addressed over there, from parking to drainage, location of the parking areas. It's a fair amount of work, a fair amount of effort. And then through it all, maintaining the condition of the road on a regular basis. And then that would have to be done in a fashion that would be conducive to stay within the confines of what's outlined, parameters that they would have to work within. They can't do a job thoroughly if they don't have positive direction. Left to their own devices, the particular individuals on site are going to make the best judgment they can with what they've got to work with to produce the best result for that particular task. That's what you would expect from any tradesperson in any situation, and that's no different. So, in short, from Great Western Road all the way down North Road, and out to the other end of Bell's Neck, towards Belmont Road, all of that would be my primary concern. The area up around the bogs, like I said, we're probably not going to agree on how that could be dealt with, but it's not just my opinion, so everybody else can think about what I've said, and I'd welcome any other comments.
Well, I have some thoughts about what you just said, but let's go around, see what other people have to say.
Well, if you want to interject while we're on that subject, maybe it's fresh in everybody's mind.
My thought is, I believe some of those, maybe some issues of the sort you're talking about were mentioned in the 2011, if I remember right. Somewhere in the reading I was doing, they were talking about specifically the grading problem. They talked about there's an outlet apparently that I didn't know near like 47 North Road, between the wetlands on the west side of North or northwest. Apparently there's a culvert there. They mention a need for a culvert, maybe is what I'm remembering there, which is a similar issue for more flow. So, but my real thought about what you're saying is that's a real problem. It's a problem that's been identified before. Nothing's been done about it, except, as you say, whatever the highway department could manage to do with whatever resources they have. Well, from my point of view, this should be part of the management plan, and I don't know whether it's part of the draft right now or not, but it should be an explicit part of the management plan. And one of the tasks that we should go away from this meeting with is figuring out how to get the funding. Not just noting that it's a problem, putting it in a management plan, which is a document that we may or may not refer to again in the near future. Somebody should be tasked with figuring out how to get the funding and fix the problem, or at least look for funding sources and try to figure out how to address the problem. It's a long-standing, well-recognized problem. It has impacts on the Herring River, on the West Reservoir. It should be addressed, and we should figure out how to address it. So let's just leave it at that. I'm noting it as an issue here, and hopefully that will be part of what we do in the future. That's what I have to say.
anyway. I agree.
Anything else to say?
Oh, good.
So I'm gonna look at this in the simplest form, all right? I've lived there my whole life, and we never had a management plan since the 60s when they first bought this. It says 1993, but it was bought in the 60s. So then myself in the business that I do every day is facilities and such. You always wonder, what are your worst vulnerable, where's your vulnerable areas in any facility or grounds? So some of the draft report that the management plan that I believe the surveyors in Yarmouth did, they talked about the pathways, the walkways, washing out culverts, some of the things like what Matt's picking up on. And so it all comes down to money. And Mark was alluding to that also because of resources. We need to put these in context. You know, a plan's great, we can talk about a management plan, but as you said, you need to find funding sources. They're not gonna get fixed unless we identify the problems, put them on a piece of paper, get an estimate of what's gonna cost to fix them, and put them in place. It's just gonna get spinning wheels, spinning wheels. Now, that site is used by thousands of people a year. It's tremendous. During COVID, I've never seen so many people. After we sold that 4-acre piece along our bog, the amount of people that are walking through there was just tremendous. And so you've got natural, you know, everybody wants to come there. It's a great resource. It's a great area. Management. What is management? Management is taking care of something. Putting in a document's great, put it on a shelf, but nothing gets done. And I hear the frustrations of everybody, I'm sure of that. However, you know, some of my ideas with the washouts on Bell's Neck, those things can be all addressed if we put a plan together that's gonna be identified in an article, and we're gonna put these remedies in there. The old the North Bridge now is a walking bridge. That was a drivable bridge at one time until the truck blew it out. I think we should put a drivable bridge back there, get funding from state and federal government to put in a nice drivable bridge across North Road, have access there for folks to go fishing, crabbing. They use the Bell's Neck Bridge tremendously in the summertime. I've never seen so many people crabbing there. If you get a nice plan put together, down south in Myrtle Beach, they build bridges through swamps, through tidal marshes. I mean, tremendous, it's beautiful. And they have offsets, landing areas or vistas where people in handicap wheelchairs can sit there and enjoy and go fishing. That would be something I would like to see for the town, because Bell's Neck is a place that the town should be proud of, and everybody wants to go there. And, you know, sometimes when you build a new house and you don't know where you get your front door, but you don't put in the walkway, and if you just left it natural and left it there and go look at the site in 6 months and see how people naturally walk into your front door because you don't know where to put the path, well, after 6 months you find out where the natural ways are, and that's kind of what happens down Bell's Neck. You see how people kind of go around this, they make their natural paths, they do this, they do that. But we need to put some effort into some money, because it isn't gonna get fixed. And we just keep kicking the can down the road. Maybe the Conservation Trust can help with some funding. Maybe they can get somebody that can donate and take some of the portions of this plan and really execute something. Maybe we need a structural engineer to look at the dike at the Heron Ladder and look at the situation of the cement. Is the flume in good condition? Is there erosion underneath? I mean,
That has been looked at recently.
do we,
I
okay.
can give you, yeah.
I mean, that's the stuff that we really gotta worry about, especially with the last recent rainstorms we've had in 2 weeks. Nobody's managing those boards down there. When the bogs were leased out, that guy used to go and pull the boards and elevate and utilize the bogs to flow the overflow through. Nobody's doing that. We're gonna have a problem at some point. You just can't let it go and not do anything. And I'm just talking out loud. I'm not saying towards anybody, but I mean, you know, and as far as the bogs, I'm in line with Mark. We've been down that road before, and it's just a shame. But anyhow, that's what I look at. It has to, and signage. I think signage is key, especially being a butter, an owner of property next door. My son just texted me now, there was 2 trespassers walking around the bog with dogs. So signs, that needs to be implemented to show people where to go, what's respectful, maybe just little things. But access is the big thing that I see for everybody. Handicap, able, willing people, everybody. And that should be our #1 priority, is a good defined access to everybody to enjoy that area. And that means fixing things along the way. That's all I got to say.
May I add one thing? Amy, myself, and Chris Nickerson from DPW did meet a couple years ago, and there was conversation about having town engineer prepare. In fact, he was on site, come to think of it, wasn't he?
Griff?
No, the engineer.
That was Griff.
No, there was an engineer.
He is.
Who was that?
He was, there
No, we-
was,
Griffin Ryder?
Griffin Ryder was here, but before that it was Bob Caffarelli, but I don't think he was here. It wasn't,
No, it was Griffin.
it was Griffin.
He was,
Yeah,
yeah, not that
he's-
it matters, anyway.
He's in Bruce.
Point
now.
being-
We don't have one.
Point being is, there was discussion, and his input at that point was he wanted to bring in a private engineering company to do the work. I don't know what, apparently he felt it was too much for his office to handle. Maybe he didn't have the field staff, I don't know the mechanics of it.
We
But
don't
that
even have
was a
to.
conversation, and I mean, everybody was in agreement that was the thing to do, so that was a prior conversation, that's all.
So at this point, however, at a minimum, it would be like a capital expenditure on the part of the town, right?
Capital expenditure, I don't know, some of it, certainly some pedestrian access improvements, changes to parking areas. Bell's Neck was funded by CPC. A lot of the Bell's Neck acquisition was funded through CPC. So CPC funding potentially could be used or.
For that part over there, the east end of the reservoir.
I would have to check. It's kind of spotted where
Yeah,
CPC funding.
So many lots there.
Yeah, there's so many lots, so we could check that. But it's a potential to ask for some CPC funding, maybe for the engineering for certain things. Because in addition to the road, you know, we want to provide access, but on Bell's Neck Road, overlooking the West Reservoir, in my mind, there's too much access because people are being allowed to use that whole thing, and they've created like 4 little beaches, and there's a lot of runoff, and we can consolidate that to 1 or 2 more accessible ones potentially, better protect the pond edge. But also, we're gonna need engineering very soon for the North Road area, bridge area, the pedestrian bridge, the pedestrian bridge area. And that is on our radar for next year, CPC funding, but potentially just engineering of roadways in the Bells Neck area.
Would it be appropriate to request an RFP for the engineering for that?
Well, we could do an we could.
Because really, I
Do an
mean,
RFP.
who's to say what it's gonna cost to get it off the ground?
You have to do that first,
Right.
yeah.
So, but the first step is to figure out whether those locations are eligible for CPC funding, right?
Regardless, I mean, CPC is just a method of funding. We're gonna need an RFP for any capital project, any
Right.
project, you need to do an RFP. And then you kind of determine after that where the money comes from.
Right, exactly.
So regardless of CPC or a town meeting vote to appropriate money,
So let's be very specific about what we're talking about here. There's
It's
two
a
issues
rolling-
that have been raised here. One is the section of Bells Neck Road at the east end of the reservoir and the beaches that are there, and what needs to be done to harden that, fix it so there isn't runoff, I don't know what the right
prevent
term.
flooding,
Prevent flooding,
divert runoff, and so it's not just going straight into either the east or west reservoir there.
right,
It's gotta be controlled and contained.
Yeah.
okay, so,
Ways to do it, and it's relatively simple, but somebody's gotta get it down
So-
on paper, so it's,
there's that, and then there's the North Road Bridge, which is a separate item, right?
Yeah, we could do it separately, because there are 2 distinct different areas. My recommendation, based on what I see out there, is on Bells Neck Road, from approximately where the little parking area with the kiosk is now,
Uh-huh.
at least to south of that reservoir, if not the entire roadway, honestly going down to the car bridge, because after you get over the car bridge, it gets so low that that's starting to flood out on extreme tides, so.
I mean, the north end of North Road, north of the
Bells
car.
Neck Road.
The south end of Belly. South
Oh,
floods.
On the south side
North of the bridge
South of the bridge.
South.
South of the bridge, yeah.
Right.
South of the car bridge,
Yeah, it goes through the marsh.
on Bell's
where it
Neck.
goes through the marsh on Bell's Neck. That's like one, in my mind, one area.
So you're grouping that, Bell's Neck Road, with the North Road Bridge, yes? So
Grouping-
that's
I'm
two separate
grouping
problems. Yeah.
Harvard versus pedestrian.
We'll just call it this. We'll call it Bell's Neck Road problems and North Road problems.
Okay, all right.
And they are both in the conservation area?
Mhm. So, it's been on our wish list to tackle the issues at the edge of the West Reservoir, the east end of the West Reservoir, for a while now. And in terms of changing the access, so there's access, but it's more defined. Changing the roadway, diverting water appropriately, getting a better base, something to divert water. So that's one area, but on that same road, if you're heading south from the reservoir, you go over the hill, and then you get to the bridge, the car bridge. Before and after the car bridge, it's extremely low. All they're doing annually, which is, because that's all we have the means to be doing, as Mark said, is grading. We bring in some T-base or
Yeah.
refined material to fill in the holes and grade it, so it keeps sinking and sinking and sinking. So all we're doing is patching it at this point. The bridge may need to be longer. The grade may need to come up. We don't know.
So it's an engineering study first to
It's an
determine what
engineering-
needs to be done, and
Yeah.
then potentially,
And then potentially funding to improve it. Then number two is the North Road pedestrian bridge area, where we've done some
Yeah.
emergency work, but south of that bridge, it would be really nice to have better access there. It's in the marsh, it's so highly used with crabbing that has exacerbated the erosion there. We've put up some symbolic fencing to keep people off dangerous areas at this point, but probably creation of another formal parking area there, because now people are just parking like in the woods. But the North Road area, I would say, and Bell's Neck Road. Should be priorities.
okay.
I agree with what's been said so far by all three folks here. And the only question I have is, you mentioned earlier about a culvert. Where is this culvert you were talking about?
So in
I know
that
what you're
2011
talking about, yeah.
report, he talked about two places where there was drainage between upstream
Yeah.
of the Herring River and downstream of the Herring River, and one of them was on North Road,
Yep.
right, I believe, just north of where Mr. Smith's thing that's on
Yep.
the North Bridge is a very narrow
Mhm.
little neck there that North Road goes through, and on the west side or northwest side of that
Oh, I know
neck
what you're
is
talking about.
more
Yeah,
salt
yeah.
marsh, which is part of the Herring River estuary.
Yeah.
And they were talking about
And then
either,
just north of that, there's more.
there's another one further
Yeah.
north, which I think that report was saying, the thing further north was pretty clear and was draining, but either there wasn't anything at that point, or there was something that wasn't functional at that point. I don't actually remember which. It doesn't seem to me that going and visiting that place, I mean, there's this curved piece with some rock revetment from the north side of Mr. Smith's thing around to where there's that
That's Mr. Dudek's property, yeah.
Dudek's property, which is, if there was something coming through, it would be coming through right there.
And that's one where we have flooding from the river, and where during high tide, it will come across from that backside of the marsh. It takes a lot of water to do that, to back up in there, but it will happen.
It's just a point that's mentioned in there, and I don't know whether that's something that we should worry about. I'm just noting that and thinking that that needs to be, reviewed, whether, and.
I've been, the space just north of Mr. Smith's property on the river at 47, I've reviewed it a few times with DPW.
Yeah,
they've added a little bit of stone to shore that up, but that area really needs to get looked at because the erosion is getting very close to the road. It's at the road, it's undermining the road at that point.
So that's a highway department problem as much as anything else.
I'm happy to help work with them on it. I don't know what
But
the
it should be
solution
part
is
of
there.
whatever, somebody in this group has to be thinking about an RFP for the top-level engineering review for these issues, right?
Mhm.
Anything else, Wayne?
Well, it sounds to me like we just gotta find some money to pay an engineer to make a plan. It's that simple, really.
Yeah, we need to do
Okay,
an
well.
RFP for a scope of services that we're looking for.
And on top of that question, if I can interject,
Volunteer money.
is do we need another hired out review of the whole area, like what happened in 2011? Anyway,
Sounds like we can only afford to hire an engineer to straighten out the road mess.
Yeah, I don't think we need.
Then we go
somebody
move on to
review
something
this.
else.
I think
Okay.
we can, it's gonna, we need time, maybe we do a few more of these work sessions.
okay.
Because it doesn't happen at the end of our meetings, we're all too
No,
done.
I absolutely agree.
So, but this is helpful so far.
Jim?
Okay, the only comment I have is a general comment with regard to how we organize these meetings. And John, I agree with your approach. As somebody who's relatively new to the commission, I don't have a lot of the history and the understanding of what has gone on in the past that like Brad has and Mark, you have. So I think the approach that you're talking about would be very helpful for me to be able to participate in these meetings.
Can I ask, Jim, did you receive the editable version of the management plan?
What I
from-
received was not an edited version, it was a version that had some of your side comments on it. So I don't know if I received exactly what you had sent. Because
You
I,
didn't send it to me, so I couldn't.
Yeah. I'll go back to my
I
email
can
chain.
go look.
yeah,
Yeah, I think.
because it would be helpful if I had a fully edited version.
Yeah.
Jim?
Because all I got was,
Right.
it had some of your side comments on different sections, and that
Any
was
track
it.
changes in the?
No, there were no track changes at all in it.
Yeah, that's odd.
So, and I did review that.
Yeah. Okay.
Is that it, Jim?
Yeah, that's it.
Dan?
Sorry.
I don't have anything to add to what's been said at this point.
Brad?
Well, I think these are all good comments. To me, these are all things that were partially mentioned in the 2012 plan, and they really need action at a level beyond the Conservation Commission. So these are line items that can be in the new plan, and they can request that the town act on them. And yeah, it needs money, it needs an RFP to do those particular projects. I'm more interested in managing the really visible bog area and going ahead with the plans that we put forth and spent a ton of time on and voted on to move ahead with the naturalization piece. So that's what I'd like to see progress move forward today. These other items are, we all can agree in this instant that they're important and they should be acted on. And they're line items in the new plan. So that's fine. But I think we need to, what the commission's gonna get involved in, I think, is managing the area off of Depot where people come in, access the dogs, and see all that activity there. So that's what I'd like to talk about today.
Okay, I guess my general comment is, reading through the 2011 or 2012 plan or whatever it was, there's a ton of recommendations sort of sprinkled in there. And my feeling is none of these things are going to happen without consistent, highly visible advocacy. You don't get anybody to spend money on something like this without pushing pretty hard. And so and you're saying we need help beyond the Conservation Commission, but they're not going to happen unless somebody is actively advocating for them and trying to figure out, pushing for funding, but trying to identify what appropriate funding sources. Default is to say, we just need to get it in as a warrant article or multiple warrant articles, but that might or might not be the right place to be looking for money. I don't even know. I mean, it requires an active conversation about how these things are going to get done, who's going to advocate for it, I guess. And some of these things have been on, in that report for a long time, but without advocating for them, they don't happen.
Don't you think, and does anyone disagree, that if you have a management plan that's published and promoted and hold a public hearing on it, that wouldn't be the vehicle to, ask for funding and action?
Well, that's the starting point, but you have to proceed from there and push people to come up with the money. So, yeah, it's an important starting point, absolutely. I'm not saying we shouldn't do this.
Right.
I'm just saying that if you want to actually get it done, I mean, we had a document, it was done by BSC, right? I mean, it's highly credible document with a lot of information in it. Some of those things happened and some of them didn't, right? And again, without advocacy, those things will just sit there in the document. So,
Just so you got it on 12/21, I forwarded it to everybody. I'm
Right.
printing you out the individual ones now, just so you can have it to review going forward. We can
Okay.
start going through it. So.
Yeah, that's very
Sorry about
helpful,
that.
Amy.
Well,
Very
Sorry about
helpful.
that.
Before Christmas.
No, I had sent it, but I should have put it in Dropbox.
Yeah,
so,
well, before Christmas, there's so much going on.
yeah.
The discussion here, and I wanted to bring this to your attention too, because I think having a plan that's produced is the first step before advocating for funding and all this outreach that John is advocating. I think getting the plan done is the first step.
yeah,
So
sure.
it helps to get funding if you have a plan done, at least with what you want to be. You can say it's a group vote that these are our priorities or something like that. But it's okay, it's gonna take a little time to do an RFP, so we can do it.
Mark.
Brad, when you say plan, do you mean a narrative or do you mean a physical?
Update of the 2012 plan, the Bell's Neck Conservation Area Management Plan.
In narrative form?
Yeah,
Yeah.
a document that can be shared,
Right.
sent out to any citizen of the town,
Yeah.
discussed. And so I feel, this commission voted in 2019 to update the plan. I feel like we've been so busy. COVID hit, we had monster meetings for 2.5 years. I just think we haven't really gotten to that. And to me, it's really should be a priority for us to finish that plan. A big question I have for us, and maybe Amy has the best insight, is can we do it in-house, or does it need to go back to BSC group?
Depends on how extensive the update is. I mean, you see, for instance, engineering plans, you see an original version and that gets revised and revised over time. So it depends on the extent of the edits.
Yeah.
I would like to try to do it, just us.
I think we can. I put
I
3
think we
hours
can.
into what you guys are gonna look at. I
Yeah.
put 3 hours into that. And I'm ready to hear other folks' comments and then one more round of edits and I'm done. If people are happy with it, so.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, sorry, so is it correct that what's happening with the bogs hasn't been agreed upon, so it's not even in this existing plan?
Well, the existing plan was 10 years ago, 12 years ago.
Got it.
So
Okay.
there were, actually, that plan recommends basically what we agreed on.
Correct. Yeah, it's
Back
Here,
then.
in
on
the
page
Conservation Commission,
14 of the plan. I have it right here.
and the commission at the time reviewed and approved that. So
Right.
at that time, the
So-
commission approved gradual naturalization.
Right.
In like 2011, 2010.
Right.
So it's not a new
That's-
concept. It just didn't, there was no action on it because it was leased. And the lease was used and then abandoned in 2015 and, or 17 maybe. So that's the history there. That plan was finished, reviewed, approved by the Conservation Commission in 2011, published in 2012. And so now we're trying to update that plan.
And that's the one piece that's like, there's disconnect.
No, the bog piece, here's what happened with the bog piece. We had 5 public hearings, and there was a lot of discussion, not a consensus. Mark was very much in support of maintaining that leasing feature. But the commission came to a vote and voted not to lease the bog in 2020. And then they voted later that year to pick option 2 among 4 options, which is gradual naturalization. So right now, that's the vote of record for moving forward. And I'm fine if we want to discuss that and consider anything, but at the same time, that's the vote of record to update the 2012 plan. That was a vote for 2019, and then 2020, a vote to adopt option 2. So for me, I'm ready to move on and update this plan. I think we've talked about it a lot. And that means all of us need to roll up our sleeves and edit this and decide what they want to add. These East End ideas are really good. They're not well fleshed out in the present version. So I think they can really be put in and bolstered. And so that's great. But we should put everything on the table today.
So,
Who's the selectman, who's our liaison from the selectmen?
Don Howe.
Don Howell, maybe we should invite him, because he would be the guy that wants to, help promote and be the advocate, to help on that piece of it, once we get all these things
He's gonna
online.
be leaving, so we might wanna wait to see more new ones.
Well, he's also running
Oh, he's
again.
running?
Yeah, he's
I thought
Yeah, he
wasn't.
is running.
No,
again.
Larry's
I didn't know
not,
that.
Larry's not running.
Okay.
Larry was the liaison during all this discussion. The discussion began in 2017. 2017 to 2020, Larry was the liaison for much of that.
Right.
And he showed up for most of the meetings.
Mhm.
He attended.
Well, I will at some point invite Don to join us. Don, when I have spoken to him a couple of times since I became chairman, and he stated very explicitly that his approach is hands-off. So when we come to a point where we think the selectmen need to be aware of what we're doing, which one of those triggers would be something that's going to cost the town money, that's the time, I believe, to talk to Don about what's happening.
Or whoever it may be.
Or, yeah, but, so after annual town meeting, probably, whether Don is a selectman or not, after that, they may rotate the liaisons anyway. I just had a point back about history, which, of course, I wasn't around here in these parts in the 60s, but going through Brad's folder of historical reviews of the Herring River, there's an extensive review of the Herring River watershed, which includes most of what we're talking about here, that was done in the 60s. So it's not like this just started with the 2011 review. This stuff is, these kinds of reviews and studies have been going on.
From around 1964.
Yeah, right, a long time
The
ago.
town first started conservation about that time.
Right.
Conservation started.
And a lot of the ideas that we're grappling with now are there in that early 60s thing, too. I mean, it's, none of this is particularly new.
Can I throw a couple other ideas I just thinking in my head? We talk about the bog, which we all have agreements, disagreements, this and that, but why couldn't we extend the bogs as part of the West Reservoir and just keep them underwater?
What would the purpose be?
You wouldn't have phragmites, you wouldn't have to have all this problems with it. The vista would stay the same, you'd have a nice open space, it would be managed, you could put the boards down on the outlet flume and just keep it the same level of the reservoir, so you make an extension of the watershed. And that way there, it puts all these other things to bed, which I hate even saying this, it's against my stuff, but that would be a simple solution to keep an open space and have the nice vista. It's rather than trees growing everywhere and whatever kind of invasive species, keep it underwater.
Isn't the elevation of even the North Bog below the water level of the West Reservoir?
The West
right now?
Reservoir was built for these bogs to be gravity feed. So the West Reservoir is higher than the bogs, other than that small little bog to the north, that's about 4 feet higher. A little acre bog, but everything else is gravity fed.
But you'd have to put up another dam downstream in order.
We have an outlet downstream that we keep boarded up.
Board it up.
You put the boards in there, let it flow, and once it gets to the height of the reservoir, it would level off the same water height.
Does that work elevations wise? I
Sure.
mean, where those
For 100
boards are?
years.
It does, actually, because that's how, when the bogs were in production, they would take water from the reservoir you hold it, and then you let it out downstream.
The reservoir,
There's certainly herring, questions there, making sure that they don't get trapped in that lower, very shallow, what would be a very shallow, wet marsh area, if you were to keep that flooded. I'm not saying it's a bad idea at all. Actually, what they talked about in the management plan on page 14, under Depot Street Cranberry Bogs, is to reclaim it as natural, to create a natural river outlet from the reservoir with the wetland floodplain, to create a more natural herring run, and all new bordering vegetated wetland wildlife habitat. So their idea is not to keep it damped up. Their idea is to let it free flow. But
well, if I may say, that the West Reservoir, half of it was a cranberry bog before they dammed it up, okay? So all that area, in 1929, that's when they built the West Reservoir. That's why you see stumps out there on the eastern end. They were trying to build that end of that over. There's actually a dike underneath the West Reservoir that's underneath the water that they failed, and there's a cable drag out there that's still there when they were trying to separate it. So I think that would be a nice solution for keeping it open, because I don't want to see trees. I mean, everything's grown up. You can't see nothing anymore, and that's kind of terrible, I think.
So I appreciate your viewpoint on that. For me, it's a little bit different. I grew up around here as well, and I've watched so many bogs just naturalize, and I just don't have a problem with that transition. I think it produces excellent habitat. You do lose open space, but you still maintain wetland functions in some cases if it's wet. If it's an upland bog, then you transition to upland. So it's an interesting viewpoint. I respect your viewpoint totally. I don't think it should be off the table, because we've got to manage that site somehow. I'm just not certain if it's easily managed. And again, I want to emphasize, I have no problem with things growing up. I look at Bank Street bogs. I don't have a problem with that, outside of the invasive plants. I think it looks great.
Well, I was just gonna refer to that they're gonna strip that off, 54 acres.
I know.
And if you keep it underwater, it would've been open, so.
Yeah.
just along those lines, a few years ago, we were talking about having a hydrology study there. And that's when we were talking about doing active management, which would be similar to what they're doing at Coldbrook proposed, or kind of this passive management, which we've been doing as option 2. We kind of didn't talk about it at the time, but if the commission is interested in managing things a different way than we've currently been managing, I think we do need somewhat of a hydrology study. We do know that those bogs, with the exception of that north one, are lower than the reservoir. But I think we need to have a better understanding of what happens if you were to open all that up. Ecosystem-wise, what would things, how much water would you have? What, if you were, just projections for what things would be.
You know who wouldn't like it is Cape Cod Mosquito Control. Yeah, they
They would like it if we opened up the entire thing, probably, and let it free flow.
I think you'd have free flow in the main channel, and
Right.
you'd have a lot of wet areas that could be breeding grounds.
Yeah.
So, and they're not really jurisdictional in here, I don't believe, but they can come in and treat it if,
They can come and treat it.
yeah, so that's another partner in all this.
We already got bogs in the Heron River system that are underwater right now, from Great Western to Main Street.
Yeah.
They're all underwater. Those are all bogs.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks okay, they've been that way for 40, 50 years. To keep them underwater, I don't think you have mosquitoes, right? It keeps flowing. No different than the West Reservoir.
Well, what you're
Yes.
suggesting isn't that far from option 2, in the sense that the southern cell was saying, let it turn to wetland. The northern cell was saying, let it transition to upland. The middle cell, which is B, I'm calling it B, it's kind of open to how we're gonna manage it. I don't think we've resolved exactly what we're gonna do there. Maybe that stays wet, maybe that, so.
By the way, where is that map? I know, I've seen that map
I'll
with
pass
different
it-
parts
I'll pass it around.
labeled. It's another piece that we need.
It should be in the plan,
In the management options.
yeah.
It needs to be here because it's referred to.
I don't mean to discredit the cranberry part, but
Oh,
if we're not,
wait a
it
minute.
doesn't seem like we're gonna get anywhere. So you might as well flood it, that's my opinion.
So-
I'm just talking out loud, sorry.
We'll get you those butters. That was in, I must not have had it directly attached to this when I put it in the Dropbox.
So I'm just going to state it. Go ahead, Mark.
Thank you. To me, it would be appropriate at this point to develop a list of concerns mechanically throughout the entire area. If we're gonna go forward with any kind of an RFP or any presentation or any further discussion, until we have identified the specific issues, that needs to be done before you can ever ask any engineering company for any pricing.
So that's Brad's point. That's what the management plan is, right? I mean, it's,
Well, that's eastern issues on 2 bridges, right? In roadways.
Well, the whole region, if it's gonna be incorporated in an actual engineering plan, you have to give them some idea of what it is they're trying to develop, to design.
Right,
So-
and to me, that's the eastern sections. I don't think you need engineering plans for the western sections.
No, I agree.
except Amy's suggesting we need a hydrology study if we're going to consider
I don't know.
alternatives.
I don't know
But-
why you have to spend money on a hydrology study. All you gotta do is take a transit down there, hold it on the height of the reservoir, go over and hold it on the bog. You got 3 feet of difference, there it is, bingo. Put the
Mark-
boards in the
Mark's going to
front of
order
that
one,
thing.
right? So,
What's the input too?
yeah, where's the water come from?
From the reservoir, from the
Water's
river,
coming
come down
from
Heron
the
River.
north. Right,
Out of
Heron
Seymour's
River.
Pond, Hinckley's Pond.
Okay, so my feeling is actually this little piece of the conversation goes with the Herring River study, the upstream portion of the Herring River study. It's like, if you're gonna study what's going on the Herring River upstream from the dam, this is part of that conversation. Whatever you're doing there, part of which is, it's about flora and fauna, right? What's there, but I would think it's also about hydrology. Where's the water coming from? What's happening to where the water's coming from, given increasing water use, increasing drought or whatever? That's all hydrological concerns, right? And it's not necessarily the same as it was 20 years ago, given that there's been a lot of development, there's more groundwater being sucked out of the ground and not ever making it into that watershed. So if you're going to do a thorough study of the upstream part of the Herring River estuary, you need to include hydrology, and why wouldn't this be part of that? Rather than us getting bogged down in this conversation, trying to just basically have a focused effort here on this, on finishing this up. Anyway, that's my point of view. And that's a whole other conversation, right? That's not, the upstream, the Herring River study is a separate conversation. We don't want to get bogged down in that here. We need another focused set of meetings for that. And I just want to state, my point of view of naturalization is what's really lacking, what we're really losing on Cape Cod, more than anything else, is loss of habitat due to extensive development. And my priority is to see the return of as much habitat as possible. And if that means trees growing where there used to be a cranberry bog, from my point of view, I don't see why we shouldn't be supporting that. The critters, the wildlife, have fewer and fewer places to go because there are houses and roads and, just lots of people. So I support whatever we can do at reasonable cost, returning some of our developed land where that can happen to habitat for local wildlife. Yes, sir.
This land is already habitat. It's been habitat from day one, and we're not talking about changing that habitat. The creatures that are there have adapted to what's been there for the last 100 years or more. Now, there's a transition going on. So that's going to incite some changes all unto itself. That's got nothing to do with the development of anything else. And I do agree with you, by the way, that development is a big hindrance, but not in this case. I don't see where the two correlate.
Well, if you fill that thing up with water, you're changing the habitat. You're creating habitat for marine organisms as opposed to whatever's living there now.
Well,
It is a
that was
change.
one suggestion, that was one remark from,
Anyway,
but
just putting in my
It's
2
another item.
cents. I agree, it's not a simple issue. None of it is straightforward. So, that's my focus, however.
The least expensive alternative is to do what Brad suggested, leave it alone.
Right.
Don't do anything. You'll end up like Bank Street in a few years and it'll only get bigger.
Right, and there's tons of areas in Harwich that are like that.
You know, a
already.
wise man once said, doing nothing is doing something, sometimes.
I don't
Okay.
mind pursuing Alan's thought for that middle cell. So I think, the northern cell is gonna transition to upland because it is up. The southern cell is wet. Let's keep out invasives and make it look nice and let it be wetland. And let's get creative in the middle cell. So,
If you flood that deep, it's not gonna be a wetland, it's gonna be actually a lake or a pond, a shallow pond. It won't be kinda like a swamp or anything.
right.
It'll kill everything off in there.
I don't know about mosquito control, how hard they're gonna push back. I don't know about permitting, whether
Yeah,
you
right.
would say you can't transition that. I don't know if there's any issues there with.
So mosquitoes shouldn't be a problem, because once you get that thing flooded, any wave action you're gonna get from the wind is gonna drown the mosquitoes out. That shouldn't be an issue. It's usually just still stagnant water that's where they breed.
What do you think, Amy, about permitting? Is there issues, transitions that DEP would want to look at?
Yep, it would probably have to be filed as an ecological restoration project. We haven't done that so far because it's been pretty much inaction. So in order to do something, I think you'd need to do an ecological restoration, NOI, even if it's just really changing water levels in there. So, they'll want to know, obviously, what it's going to look like.
Yeah.
I think it's doable, but you can't just do it.
Yeah, I don't know if I favor it, I'm just trying to think out of the box here. Another thing is, we discussed under option 2 of having cooperative educational farming in some of the upland areas for wetland plants and shrubs. Is there any interest from the farming sector? It was discussed, it was part of the record. So I don't know if tech, no one really came forward on that in the public hearings. But the commission, voted to go with option 2, but did not throw out the concept of some cooperative, farm educational piece.
I think that got kicked over the Main Street, didn't it?
Maybe, yeah, by proxy, but I think, that interest was there, so it hasn't gone away.
who had that interest, Brad? Because I think I recall that's slightly different than what I'm hearing.
It's in the document.
I remember that conversation, and the conversation about the tech school participating, but I'm not sure that came from a representative of the tech school. I think that might have been in among our group
I remember it
as a
that way.
suggestion.
I think it was a suggestion to try to find some middle ground, maybe.
Yeah.
Yep,
It said option 2 included consideration for allowing existing cranberry plants to be harvested by local farmers and the management of the middle bog to allow the public to pick your own and an upland shrub growing in the northern bog in a partnership with some local cooperative. So that was part of the option 2 discussion that was voted on.
So, my feeling about that, it's like the stuff that requires funding. It's probably a good idea, but it's never gonna happen unless there's an advocate who takes the idea up and tries to make it happen. And
I agree.
I think anybody here, I think the commission, everybody on the commission would welcome anybody here or anywhere else taking it up and trying to find a way to make that happen, which includes, working with a tech school, or maybe not, maybe some other independent third-party organization who wants to make that a project. And I think it's great to leave it in if it's in your draft, or to put it in if it's not, as an option that could be done if someone's interested in actually making that happen.
Well, here's something we probably should be clear on and discuss, is, to me, this was a document that was reviewed by the Conservation Commission and voted on as part of that meeting to decide which option we're going to pursue. So to me, it's the document of record. It's what the commission voted to move on. And so, does anyone have, different feelings on that? We can revisit anything, anytime. But to me, that's what we're supposed to be working on.
Right, I don't think what I was saying is in contradiction of that. But I think we've had a discussion here. I would like to move on, and I think, unless people think otherwise, the thing to do now is to take Brad's document and for Brad to step through the changes he'd made and review, step through the whole document, describe the changes you've suggested, and then we can request that people gather their thoughts about all of these things, and we'll schedule a follow-up meeting sometime in the not-distant future,
Next month.
and try to get to a point then where we can review any changes, additions, subtractions that people want to make, and move on and vote, come to some conclusion at a subsequent meeting about a final version of this. But I think,
Quick question.
yes,
Was it agreed upon that a hydrology report would be a good idea either way, or no, not yet? Okay.
no. People had opinions, and I have it on my list of things we have to think about later.
It really fits into the upper watershed study that we've talked about. And is that too far down the road to help this? Maybe, but I think you're accurate. It fits into that interest.
Well, maybe we can agree that whatever we're doing over the next couple of years, we should try to preserve the option for that middle section to be flooded, which means trying to inhibit the invasion of a lot of trees there, I would think would be mostly what it means. But I think at this point,
You want me to go through this?
I think, yeah, I mean,
Okay. It's easy for me because a lot of this is really basic editorial stuff that I don't.
Yeah, I looked at all that.
Yeah, I'll just kind of give you what I did, and it'll help you think about it. So this is the BSC group draft, their plan that was done, published 2012, Conservation Commission reviewed and approved it in 2011. And so I just went through it. In the first page, I just kind of wrote a few things of how we got here with the different hearings we had. So that's under C, the purpose of this plan. Then I left a big space under D, progress. There's a bunch of things, mainly led by Amy, that have occurred that I think are positive. And I think they should be highlighted right there.
Sure.
Here's what was done. And so I think that space is left there for folks to add things, or Amy and Melissa. And then as we move on, you can see this just, minor edits, minor comments. And we could disassemble this entire thing and start from scratch, or we could take, I agree, I'm just kind of putting it out there. I think we want to build on what was done and not reinvent the wheel and update a few things. And so, even under pages 9 and 10, you'll see just a couple editorial comments, update the frag information. And then moving on, you can see under management goals, this is where I think it's important to get things like.
where is this now, Brad?
Page 13 and 14. It won't take folks long to really go through this. And so 13, 14, this is where you insert things like some of these eastern broad issues. How is the boards between the East Reservoir and the West Reservoir managed? I have no idea. At the roadway, that should be in here. The issues about the bridges, recommendations on the bridges. This is where the previous plan recommended to naturalize that bog. You can see I inserted in page 14 information on the herring harvest. So that's pretty minor. And then the big edit that I have is on 15, where I included some background on how we got here with all these hearings in the first 2 paragraphs. And then I clipped out the bog naturalization piece from what we voted on, and I put it in there.
So,
And then a little further down, I've actually included all of the pieces from option 2 on page 19 and 20.
oh, okay.
So to me, not really extensive changes coming from me. I inserted option 2 and the history behind that into this plan. And there's just lots of room for us to dig into this. I think there's a lot here in terms of use of herbicides that can be updated. There's also talk of, they wanted to have some handicap accessible features put into the reservoir near the fishway. I think we should all revisit that and think about that. The recommendations from 2012 were to put some hardscape in, and I'm not so sure that I'm interested in that, but I think we absolutely need to discuss it. But that's what I did, folks. I really just took those discussions that we had, 5 public hearings and the vote on option 2, and I put it into this plan. And so, I don't think it's that far from being something that
I think we can work on this.
yeah,
Something
we can add these other features that came up today that are not new issues, but they should be in here, and have some hard recommendations on what we're looking for. And that could be a bunch of issues that I haven't even thought about too. So,
Can I just do a slight offshoot about the ADA access piece? So I think that is something that is lacking in the Bell's Neck, and it would be nice to provide something for that here. I agree, I don't think the herring ladder is the appropriate place for it. It's a sensitive area, it's a tight area, it's already really busy. A thought that I had was on the Bell's Neck roadside of things. Increasing the parking area there, maybe getting the parking area a little farther from the wetlands, moving it uphill a little bit, but then having maybe, and this would require obviously a variance and conservation approval, but at one of those, like 4 open areas right against the reservoir now, maybe doing some sort of a little bit of a raised platform, like a viewing deck or something like that for people with a bench or something. So having a fishing area, one of those areas, and then having like an ADA viewing platform, and then closing the rest off.
What you're talking about is the north end of Bell's Neck Road, and the east end of the reservoir, right? So people bird there as well, right? And
So right now, there's a lot of erosion because of road runoff, a lot of erosion because people are just parking literally right next to the reservoir. That is where people launch boats, patrolling motors or kayaks really to get into the West Reservoir. But we can manage it better because there's at least 3 fairly wide open areas right now where people are doing that. And it's silting in part of the reservoir, all those contaminants are flushing right into there. So minimizing some of the very open areas there, maybe making one of them an ADA little deck platform, something like that would be nice. People could fish off it too. But just thoughts, that would be, I would think, an ADA appropriate area versus the herring ladder.
I just had some ideas as we were talking about that. If everybody can envision driving in from Great Western Road,
Yeah.
down Bell's Neck Road, just as you get to the bottom of the hill before the reservoir on the right-hand side, on the left is an area that's kind of like open. That could be a nice parking area,
That's what I was
defined.
thinking.
And maybe shut the road off there, stop it. And then come in from the other side, from Bell's Neck Road, you can still access over the bridge and go to North Ridge and make a parking area down there, or where it stops, where you shut off the road to go towards the north, towards Great Western Road, make that a parking area coming from the south, and then just shut off the drive-in between the approach of the West Reservoir from Great Western Road to where it comes to North Road. On
I would
Bell's
love
Neck.
that.
And then you
but
could have, then you have,
Emergency access might not want that, but,
well, that would come under the design,
Yeah.
when making the parking spaces, you'd have a dead-end road. And it'd be more control of all that drainage coming down those hills, rather than continuing across the reservoir between the east and west reservoir.
not a bad idea.
So is
It would
that,
eliminate a lot of, I'm sorry, John.
is that causeway always been there? Or has there been a more open connection between those two parts?
I don't know of any.
I think it's always been there.
Technically a town road.
Yeah.
Well, the east reservoir was a bog,
Right.
until the hurricane of '38 washed out the dikes and made it all salt water, because that was all cranberry bogs.
Hurricane of 38.
It's hard to envision it, but yeah.
Yeah, it
And out,
was.
and out in the middle, there's an island there, that was where a big screen house, it was a three-story building there. But they used to sort the cranberries.
When I was a kid, we used to transplant white perch from Chatham up in there.
Hmm.
Well, that thing was still, well, that flume was there, and then, I forget what hurricane it was, wiped that flume out. Sulu Gillis, Gisela, I remember him filling it in, creating that pond. It was brackish pond.
Do you recall the fish went from West Reservoir into the east area back in the day?
No,
Okay.
it's just separate water areas, that bog he's talking about on the east side of the Bell's Neck Road.
Yeah,
And that was diked off at once, and it was a pond.
right.
And, because the guys did it on purpose to make a pond out of it for fishing. And we used to go fishing down at the laundry pond in Chatham and catch white perch and bring them up there and let them go.
Stocking.
Yeah.
Back in the
We
day.
were illegally stocking, as
That's
they would
right.
say today.
So I've read that there was some connection between the two, whether it's a pipe or a board system, but I don't know if
I
there
don't
is.
think so, not
Okay.
there. I think it was always when the salt water came in from the other side.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
There's a map on record from the United Cape Cod Cranberry Company about 1909, and it shows that whole area. In the plan book, I'll get you the plan book and page
Yeah.
number.
You know about
And
that
it
history.
shows all that, what's that?
So you know about that
Yeah,
history.
yeah, and it shows all that, it shows it how it was.
Yeah, it was
in
a
the
bog.
day. It was a bog.
So what's this plan book?
It's a plan, it's a registry of deeds. It's an
Oh,
actual
for
physical
that area.
engineered plan survey
Oh.
in 1909 from United Cape Cod Cranberry Company,
I
because
see.
they own the whole thing.
Hmm.
I only know this factual from my grandfather. I wasn't alive then, obviously. But
You weren't
I-
around for the 38
No,
hurricane?
no. But I can attest it's the truth, because it was told to me every day.
Yes. Wow. Mr. Chair, can I ask then, was that a good summary, or are there any questions under what I said about my edits?
I had one question, but you answered it before I got to ask it, so I think you're right, they're pretty simple edits. I read the editable version without the edits. So I'm going to go back myself and review this and think about what's there and what might need to be added. My taste is to have a very explicit, clear, concrete set of like goals and targets at the end. And so that it's easier for us to track progress against this and think about what needs to be done, because I think that's the most difficult part of this process is keeping track of all the things that are called out in the previous report, all the things we know that need to be addressed, keeping track of them and staying focused on them. So that's what I would request. Maybe Amy, we've got time still. We've got plenty of time. I think you should step through your other,
And we can definitely pick another meeting date.
and then at the end, pick another meeting date and,
Yeah. So, again, this is just us thinking the other day of, since 2012, what we've accomplished there, what we're focusing on. So, a huge piece was that the acquisition of the final 4 pieces of the property from the Hall family back in around 2016, and that completed what we call the emerald necklace around the West Reservoir. So now we own the entire way around the reservoir, and there is a trail there. We did have some signage, we keep trying to do better signage there. People tend to like to remove our signs about what's private property and trails, and people must really like to collect our little trail guide, like your little plaques for like showing
Like
people
little
where to
circles.
go.
Yeah,
They get
arrow-
taken all the time.
And they get taken, so somebody has a collection. But we'll continue on that. It
It's
kinda
not,
goes
it's
along-
not just raccoons collecting shiny objects?
It might be to get them froze, I don't know, something's kicking off our sign. But it's not just there. One of the constant issues that we looked at and what was mentioned in the Bell's Neck Land Management Plan was all these social trails that people create. Sometimes they start off as deer paths, or somebody's like, oh, I want to get down to the water, and then 10 other people decide they want to get down to the water. And that does fragment habitat, so that's a constant struggle that we deal with. We routinely maintain trails, we block off things that should be blocked off. So, going back to this, at the time of the creation of the plan, the Bell's Neck was, the whole Bell's Neck was mapped as estimated habitat for rare wildlife. And just in my time here, I'm seeing every few years estimated habitat being reduced and reduced and reduced by the Natural Heritage and Endangered Species Program. And I don't quite know why. It's not like the habitat's not still there. So now, only the portion on the western shoreline of the West Reservoir and the cranberry bogs is mapped habitat. The rest of the Bell's Neck is not. So I would like to contact Heritage and say, what made you unmap some of these areas? Just purely out of, because it's a town-wide thing that's happening that I've noticed, is for no reason that I can think of. I mean, these habitats have stayed the same, why are they not mapped as being important anymore?
Maybe because you're doing a good job.
Thanks, but no. Okay, so since the plan was created, we have put up barriers.
Well, wait a minute, can we just
Oh, sure, sorry.
agree on that? That
You don't
you,
need to
yes,
vote.
you should? I mean, I
Anybody
saw
else
some
interested
nodding
in
heads.
why?
Let's
Yeah, I
just
think it's a
settle
good
that
idea for you to
now.
ask them, absolutely. If there's something going on, we should know about it.
Or
Yep.
is it that they don't have staff for review? Because obviously if there's projects that happen within priority habitat in town, they have to, when they apply for notice of intent with us, they have to apply with Heritage. Is it, are they prioritizing? I don't know. But I've noticed, I mean, it's drastic reduction in mapped habitat from the Mass Endangered Species Program over the past. I know.
Yeah.
So what they do is they don't map necessarily, they map the species, but they map the habitat that's conducive to species. And if anything, I feel like we're starting to do a better job of protecting things, so why would that change? And it's not just like turtles, it can be, it's a lot of aquatic species, a lot of plant species that are on those
We have
lists.
the grass and the bird species that are both endangered.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do that, that's easy enough to reach out to probably Amy Koenig over there. Since we created the plan, we put up barriers such as concrete blocks, fencing, and piles of stone to prevent people from driving into the Bell's Neck. I know when I first got here, you could, 10, 11 years ago, from Bell's Neck Road, you could take one of those old bog roads and essentially drive almost all the way to the herring ladder.
Used to be able to, yeah.
Not anymore.
No, not anymore.
We need to re-establish those a bit because over the years, people have been picking away at those barricades and they're getting lower and lower, but it's worked from getting cars out of the Bell's Neck, and that helps with policing too.
So, one of the things in that earlier report was about the very wide trails that were causing pretty bad erosion on hillsides, and they were recommending various things, amongst which were putting oak mulch to suppress the erosion. Has any of that happened since then, or is it, I mean, should that be another thing on our list of trying to actually get done?
There's one, so because we've stopped a lot of vehicular access, that has helped a lot of ways. But there is one particular area that could use either potentially a mulching or planting, and that is if you walk over the herring ladder and you go straight.
Yeah,
There's a big gathering area right near the pond there, and people have been having fires there. It's a sand pit at this point. And that it didn't used to be completely open like that.
is it start as a borrow pit at some point? No, it's just,
It's slowly gotten bigger over
It gets
the
bigger
years.
and bigger every year. I think people, when they're walking, it's like a gathering place. People might be using it for fishing, for letting their dogs swim in the reservoir. So that could be an area, I don't know if oak mulch is not as a wise thing, or just maybe installation of some split rails, some plantings to kind of narrow that area a bit. Better define that area, again, allow access but reduce it a little bit. That's one of our main areas, but
Can I do clarification? At the beginning of that road, from Bell's Neck Road, you said you dump stuff there to block the road? It's not like a gate or anything, it's just dump material?
so it's stone. It's like, it was 8 to 12 or 16-inch stone, not by the water, but
No, by
on the
Bell's-
hill.
On the hill, on the road. The only reason why I ask is if there was an emergency and a vehicle couldn't get down there, now we gotta have somebody come and move that material to get an ambulance or somebody down
Yeah,
there.
so
Before
grown up,
we did it, I asked fire department,
And that's what
and
they said it was okay?
it was fine.
Okay. I'm just asking.
But yeah, we did think about that. I mean, they have such big trucks and brush breakers and they said, DPW could get in there, but they, a gate might not be a bad idea, as in,
It might be better served.
yeah, for
accessible.
response.
I would support that, removing those piles and putting up a gate at the various entrances. If nothing else, it would make the area look a lot cleaner.
Yeah,
The way it is right now, it looks pretty hodgepodge.
I know,
You know,
it works, but
it does work, but it's ugly as sin.
Then a cops can get down
they're
there or
getting
something.
pushed, yeah.
Just as an aside, it's funny because I live on, right off of Hinckley's Pond by that old bog, and all the parties that used to happen in the woods right across from our house, they've stopped, so I just wonder if they've like found their new home and.
Well, they're definitely in
Area.
Robbins Pond.
Yeah, okay,
And
right through
the
there.
Brewster Conservation Trust, or Brewster Conservation Department, it's right across from your area, they
Yeah.
put up big
Boulders,
stones.
Yeah,
But they're moving those.
yeah, they are, I know.
People are coming in and moving these stones that are half the size of these tables.
how?
Yeah, it's crazy, they're
Big
chopping down
trucks,
trees
the chop,
and-
yeah, they're determined.
Anyway,
Party spots move
it's tough.
every few years. The Robbins Pond is a hot spot right now. Bell's Neck used to be. I feel like it's getting more use, especially with COVID, so it's less of a party spot.
We've definitely had a few recent fires.
We've had a few fires,
and
nips, things like that.
empty liquor bottles.
But yes, so I'm either, if we could even do that heavy duty split rail fencing, because that would be easier in the event of an emergency. Because all it is 2 posts and we screw the 6x6 in. And those are super easy to come out in case of an emergency, versus a gate, and we have that because we bought some, and it would look better. It's this fencing that we used over by the North Road Bridge, and if we do it well enough, it's harder for people to get out. People tend to like to put chains on gates and pull. So maybe we try a lower
Trail
cost solution,
cams.
like we have trail cams now. We are figuring out how to change the settings so we don't take a million pictures in a minute, because they're very sensitive. But we have some concrete blocks over by the walking bridge on the north side of that, we have some concrete blocks because people were driving down to, I call it Poison Ivy Path down there, that's to that island that you were talking about. We had a fire there a few years ago, almost burned down a lot of, well, understory in there. But it's better than it was. We used to have cars, crazy ATV use, lots of dirt bike use in there, and it's gotten better. So the barriers are working we're not gonna ever get it all, but it's helped. Made various attempts to dissuade people from making and using social trails, stay on mapped trails, little success there. We try to sign the trails pretty well, try to cover when we see social trails happening with brush, people just open them back up. Big thing last year, we pushed back and better defined the parking area near the herring ladder, created a slight increase in the buffer and preventing people from driving right up to it, along, with all their oil and whatever else is coming out of the car. Planted native seed and a few red maple saplings. Then we had the drought last year. So we'll see how they do this year. We we did some this week with the autumn olive, but removed invasive plants such as bittersweet, honeysuckle, gray willow, multiflora rose, autumn olive, along or within the wetlands. Something we noticed this year, and we did our best to dig it up, was that Phragmites is actually coming in the West Reservoir on that east side on the Bell's Neck Road. Not surprising, because right across the street in the East Reservoir, it's all Phragmites. But we really want to try to prevent it from getting into the West Reservoir, so we had a work day where we went out and dug as much of it as we could out, because it's a small enough area, probably the size of these 2 tables. We'll continue to do that as it resprouts. But same time, include that in a renewed effort to get proposals to take care of the Phragmites that's in the bogs off Depot Street. The price that we got 2 years ago was too much. We couldn't afford it out of our wetlands account at the time. We have more wetlands funding now. We're allocating potentially a lot of that towards the Herring River study. But I think we need to have a renewed effort. It's not something that we could take care of in-house. It is a large enough area of frag that's starting both on the bogs north of the road and south of the road at this point. They need to be treated.
North of the access
The
road?
access road.
So the proposals from a couple of years ago, what kind of money were you talking about?
We were talking in the $15,000 to $20,000 range. Regardless of that, we need to do it before it becomes undoable. Right now, it's still manageable. But regardless of what we do with the bogs, if we don't manage that frag, I think even with some fresh water, even if we had more freshwater inundation, frag is really resilient. We saw it, in 1.5 to 2 feet of water in the West Reservoir. So even if you flood those bogs, I think you're still gonna have it. So I would put that as a top priority, like a ASAP, get a revised quote for that. And because that's smaller money, I could just use best management practices and solicit 3 quotes to do it. From places like Wilkinson, Blue Flax Design, Crawford, places like that.
Are there any state programs to get the convicts from the county jail to come down and do it? Dig it up?
Well, they need to have a pesticide license for it.
Well, no, I'm not talking about using chemicals, but physically dig it up.
Organic.
I used to use them a lot for other things.
Oh, really?
I don't know
Let's
about
put them to
that.
work
I haven't.
upstream.
There you go.
Yeah.
Make them clean the stream out. You remember doing that
This
once?
is to the point where I think digging is not
Not-
an
no
option
option.
anymore. No,
What kind of chemicals you gonna use to kill it? Just curious.
it would be a cut and white method with a glyphosate, the wetland approved kind, but cut and white method, not a foliar application. So, I think it's the only way you're gonna get it.
Do you get dynamite? Probably that
It
would
likes
just
being
spread the roots
burned.
around.
It comes back stronger when you burn it.
Oh, yeah.
How
How about mowing it down and on a yearly basis?
It won't, because every little piece that you mow will
It'll
resprout
generate,
as you
is that
plant.
right? Yeah.
The roots are amazing, how
Yeah.
deep they go and how extensive they are.
It's the roots, the seeds, these little nodules it sends
Yeah.
out.
The
You know that.
glyphosate's really, it's effective if it's
Yeah.
done properly. You don't have to do a lot of it or do it over too many times. It should work really well.
Yeah,
And
it
it's
depends
not
on when you do it.
damaging. Right.
Yeah.
Glyphosate works best when the sugars are going down in the end of the growing season, into the
Exactly,
roots.
yeah. Late
And
summer.
it takes it down there,
early
kill
fall.
it off under the ground.
Yep.
Mhm.
So you're a certified herbicide applicator?
I am. I'll be your contact.
Just read those ethics rules first. Hey, Amy, just read the ethics rules
Yeah,
first.
no, I'm not saying that you can't.
That's a joke, put on.
But that is, you having that experience is wonderful, for this board, so, but yeah. I wasn't saying, oh, yes.
I
do
know.
it.
I'm just
Of
reminding.
course, yes, of course. No, we can't do that, but I forgot about that. Okay. I read that you were certified. Okay. We had various meetings and a town meeting regarding hunting, including last year when there was a citizen petition to ban it. Ultimately, the decision resides with this commission on hunting. That would have been an advisory vote at town meeting only. So just thought it deserved a place in our outline here. Then from 2018 to 2020, we had various meetings about how to deal with our cranberry bogs, which we've already talked about today. And most recently, in 2022, we had to fix the access to the pedestrian bridge up North Road. Erosion from both pedestrian and vehicular use caused it. We brought in some native material and stone to stabilize the area, installed fencing to keep cars and people off the street. But on the south side of that bridge, like I mentioned, it's extremely low. It is all salt marsh, it's all upper marsh. So something this committee or the town really should consider in this next year is to see what would be best for that area. We want to continue to allow access. How do we make it more accessible? In my mind, planning ahead for 50 years down the road, you look at climate change and sea level rise, and there should be a raised boardwalk, in my opinion, from the bridge all the way to the edge of the woods, where the path is that comes from North Road. So, and let everything underneath regrow as salt marsh.
Similar to what they want to do at Wings Island in Brewster,
Not on that scale,
but similar.
I
a
wouldn't say,
raised boardwalk.
how about similar, because it's not very popular over there,
No,
so.
that's what I'm
Yeah, but
saying.
yes, so we already have an access here. I mean, yes, they have an access to Wings Island via natural history property over there. This would be taking an existing access point that's degraded and improving it for better access and for the environment. So not creation of a new one, new access.
What is everybody's viewpoint on replacing that footbridge on North Road with a driving bridge like it used to be years back?
I think there'd also have to be a lot of improvements to North Road itself to do that.
Probably get a lot of federal funds.
Why?
I guess I would ask, to what purpose would you make that a driving bridge? If we already have a driving bridge that services neighborhoods and there's only a few to
Well,
what
it
would
is,
be the
it
purpose?
is a different neighborhood.
The access for people who are in, physically impaired, that can't walk very well and whatnot, to be able to drive through there, and enjoy the wetlands and the scenic views.
But an improved boardwalk would also allow for accessibility, potentially ADA accessibility.
Yeah, wheelchairs, yeah, but I'm talking about, we're talking about automobiles.
Well, the other
I know,
issue,
but that's, it both ways would improve it.
the other issue is accessibility to those homes at the other end of North Road. Should there be a reason they couldn't go out for emergency access, because it is a town way.
I'd be willing to bet in this last flood we had that
Oh, it was-
curve
it
there,
was icy.
curve
That's
right there
exactly
was.
what, they were cut off right
Yeah,
there.
they were.
Yeah.
We saw a
You know?
woman wade through the water, because we were there, and we saw a woman, an older woman.
And it was
wade
after
through
high
the
tide.
water, and it was
And
10
it
feet of
was-
water.
Yeah, just on a basic high tide, it's almost in
Yeah,
water.
she parked her car and walked.
Yeah.
Mark, if I may, for this, I would say that's a good item to have in this plan as a recommendation to evaluate.
Yeah.
Instead of coming up with a decision within the plan,
Yeah.
have, because
Yeah.
that's a big ticket item that, needs a lot of town departments to weigh in on. So that could be a
Yeah.
recommendation for the plan to
Do you
study
have an
this.
opinion on that particular
I-
topic?
I don't, you know me, I'm kind of focused on just, environmental issues, and that's a multi-dimensional issue.
Mhm.
Hey, Amy, question, are there questionable properties within Bell's Neck? Remember a couple of years
The
ago?
ownership?
Yeah, that might get
Some of the
acquired?
marsh is either not owned by anybody, or some of the marshes, the upland, I think, is all claimed.
Because what about that time when you had me go over with the squatters on the island there?
Oh, well, the island is like no man's land, but in terms of along the roadside there, that's,
No, I meant the island itself. Well, so who owns, is that part of
it's
town?
not part of Bell's Neck.
Then who's,
I don't know.
that's what I'm getting at.
It might be owners unknown.
Is that something that could be somehow
Yeah, because somebody was asking.
acquired by the town through
Yeah.
eminent domain or whatever?
But that's
So
not,
somebody was trying to clear title to it and they didn't finish pursuing it.
is that outside of the conservation area?
I'm not sure
Oh,
which
it's
one
in
they're talking
Herring
about.
River, right along, it's part of the Herring River and everything.
If it's outside the conservation area, then we'd have to think about whether, it should be something we weigh in on.
So
Well, I'm just throwing that as a idea, that's all.
I have a comment about the Bell's Neck, the North Road Bridge, which is, it's not clear to me that proposing or being concerned about automobile access on that road is at all within the purview of the Conservation Commission. It might be something the town decides to do or decides is important, but I don't think it has much to do with preserving the conservation lands there that the Conservation Commission is responsible for. Fixing erosion problems and things like that, I think we can talk about, but I don't know that going forward with proposing an automobile replacement to that bridge is within our purview. So I wouldn't be in favor of including that as a suggestion or a recommendation within the management plan.
To even study it?
Yeah, but, right, because I don't think it's relevant to our agenda and our remit.
Well, the only thing is, if you have better access for everybody to traverse back and forth on North Road, it just enhances the public's opinion of our wetlands and our beauty and whatnot. And you shut things off like that, and it's only a limited number of people that get exposed to it. And
Wouldn't we have to make the final decision under the care and custody of the property? So I think it would come
Yeah,
back.
so I wouldn't say we should say one way or another whether we're in favor of something or not if, at this point.
Okay, well,
It could be a generic recommendation to evaluate
Yeah,
the
you can
infrastructure.
put it, Brad drafted some changes, other people can make recommendations, and we can all discuss it, if it's laid out. But what our priorities would be there, I think first, management of existing, what we have there is priority. And then we definitely should think to the future anyway. But management of existing, I'll recommend first.
How about the northern border? Is it the bike path or does it extend beyond that?
It's the railroad, the bike path.
That's the extension of the conservation area.
Retention lines and then
The
the bike
trust
path.
has
Yeah,
a little bit
south
on
side.
the north of that
Okay.
pension line, though. I think the Harwich Conservation Trust owns a little bit on that, north of that, no?
Because that area we want to work in the river because it's getting choked with wetlands plants.
Oh, there,
And that-
okay.
And that
Oh,
culvert.
between the bike path and Great Western Park?
Yeah, I don't know exactly where the northern border is for the conservation. I should
Going
know
up the
that.
river, we own pieces going up the sides
Right.
of the river,
Yeah.
under our care and custody.
All the way up.
From the
right?
reservoir north.
Yes.
So we may want to have some small item on stream maintenance of that section as well as the culvert. I know NRCS is looking at the culvert replacement, so we could find out where that is and then maybe just say, yeah, we'd like to see.
Which
Underneath the
culvert?
bike path?
The bike path culvert.
Oh, yeah.
The bike path culvert?
There's some question of whether it's jammed up this stuff.
We-
The flow pattern through it is not clean. I've tried to get divers in, I made a request, I didn't get divers down there.
I don't blame them, I wouldn't go in there
I
either.
go down there.
There was divers, before they renovated the bicycle path, there was divers that went underneath there, my grandfather, they went underneath and it was in great condition. And
Yeah.
actually, the height of it was like 6 feet high.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, granite blocks,
It-
yeah.
Because the reservoir is high, that's why you only see the very tip of the,
Yeah.
of the culvert
Right.
now. But it's actually like 6 feet depth.
I'm not even sure if we should replace it, I just think the flow pattern looks obstructed to me.
There's a report that when they did the bicycle path, I'll look it up, I'll try to find it.
Yeah.
'Cause they actually looked at, because they were considering that at that time. They actually wanted to move, because that wasn't the real river channel, the river channel was further to the east.
Right.
I think it'd be cool to completely open that up and make it a bridge so you can see
Oh.
underneath the whole thing.
Kayakers.
I would,
Yeah.
and that would help with the flow, with the vegetation too. There is an impact, I mean, there's some impediment there. I know there's good flow, but.
Yeah, Might be some brush or something jammed up in there.
Yeah.
That's what I wonder.
Probably is, branches or something got in there.
Yeah, I've asked DCR to look at it because they owned it. I've asked the state dive team to go in there, and I was on the team, and I aged out, and so otherwise I'd be there.
Really?
But
Okay.
I'd love to go through that.
Maybe we call Mass Maritime, maybe somebody.
Well, you can always volunteer and rent some gear and go in there.
I got gear, I still dive, but it probably should be an official action. You know. I've dove a lot in the Herring River, and I got caught once in a pine tree that was underwater.
Oh, that's scary.
That was, yeah, that was.
I'll bet.
But anyways, that could be in the plan. A
Yeah.
very simple recommendation, let's evaluate the condition of that culvert,
Yeah.
and let's seek better stream maintenance upstream.
What about the one on Gray Western also?
Yeah, we can do the same thing.
Yeah. And then go up to Main Street and do that one, check that. I've been in through the one on Main Street in a canoe. You can't, I don't think you can do it now, but I have before, years ago. The one underneath your hands,
Oh, yeah.
like this up to the ceiling,
Yeah.
praying you didn't see a snake.
Spiders.
Procedurally, is there a particular permit that would be required to pull an item through that culvert to catch anything and drag it through?
No,
That'd just be maintenance.
no, just routine maintenance.
Yeah.
That would be something to take a look at, because that's a real easy thing to do with such a big culvert. Tie together 3 truck tires and run a cable through there and reach down over the other side with a excavator or backhoe or something and drag it through, and if there's anything in the way, it's coming.
You would need the clearance from DCR.
Right,
that
because that's
owns
their
it.
bike trail.
And I wrote them that letter in my capacity with the state, and they didn't respond. I think it was just like one more thing they didn't want to deal with. But you're right, it would take 3 hours,
Yeah,
tops.
simple thing to do, right?
It's flowing pretty good, because I went down there after this recent rainstorm, that water's making whirlpools down there, so, on the south side of it.
It is, to my eye, there's a little bit of a backwater, and there's a little bit of irregular flow pattern downstream. So I just wonder, are there logs jammed in there? And I agree with Amy, though, in the long run, I wouldn't mind seeing portage through there. We could, take a kayak through there and have open flow. So The blocks do look good. I mean, the granite blocks look nice, but that could be a long-term plan to try to open that up.
Keep the blank granite blocks.
Yeah.
Just reuse them.
Yes, yep.
Okay.
So, I have some questions, but before I get to the questions, on a completely different topic, everybody's here, so I want to bring it up now, which is ethics training. I got an email, you got an email from Emily.
Sent it to everybody, yeah.
Did you send it out? Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I already did it.
Good. All right, okay, well, that's enough of that then.
Yeah, no, I got it.
All right.
We have a little bit of time. Can't sleep, you know.
Did it take you 2 hours?
Well, the problem, Emily's email does say it does lag in times as you're going through.
So it's got some bugs that need
Oh, yeah, good.
But
worked out.
I didn't,
Lag's another word
Yeah.
for boring.
Gotta do it though, we all have to.
Yeah.
I just want to bring up some things, and we've got a little time, just that came out of my reading of this stuff. One question, and some of this is for review, is there's inventories of invasive species and flora and fauna. Do you think any of this needs to be updated, particularly the invasive species?
Invasives we'll look at and update as needed. The other ones, I don't think so. Unless we go through and we know there's absolutely something else there. But that inventory was done over a 12-month period of time for the flora and fauna there.
So
It's very comprehensive.
somewhere in that document, it mentions an Excel workbook with all the flora and fauna, and a catalog of conservation parcels and what flora and fauna are in there. At least that's how I understood that.
That's in your Dropbox.
That Excel file? I didn't see it there. I'll look again.
Yeah, there's also,
In-
like, kind of written out one that's by, I can't remember if it was it PSC group?
It's an appendix. It's one of the appendices.
Yeah,
right?
it's one of the appendices, that it's in there as well.
To the report?
And that's in your
We'll
Dropbox.
double check, but we think it's in there.
But there's a letter that
Okay,
goes through
I
by
didn't-
conservation area and says what's been found.
Okay, I'll look again. In the RFP that resulted in that report, there was a bunch of other things in there, including a catalog of other areas and ponds. Did anything come of any of that? Did
We have,
BSC
Yep.
evaluate?
The 10 parcel stewardship report that they did for us at the same time. And I didn't give it to you because we weren't talking about that today, but I can make that available to you. It's a less in-depth version. It's a stewardship report. It gives details of what 10 of these properties are. The commission picked 10 back at the time to do. Existing conditions, minor recommendations and things, not as in-depth as a whole year study as Isabel said.
I see. Could you put it in
Yep.
Dropbox with the
Yep.
other things?
Called the 10 parcel stewardship report.
So there's also
We've been
just,
working on that too.
what's that?
We've been working on the activities in that too.
That's a separate
Various-
thing, but I'm just curious
Yeah.
about what's there. Also, there was discussion of vernal pools and vernal pools in that area. They were referring to a potential vernal pool north of Great Western Road, which it sounds to me almost like it's that area that you were talking about, but I'm not sure. It sounded like it's just on the west bank of the river north of Great Western Road. And do you know if there's been a certified vernal pool there? Do you know anything about that
I
reference?
have an idea of which one they're talking about. It was it's south of where Main Street comes in to, at that point, that turns into what, Depot there? So if you keep going north into North Harwich.
Oh, up,
It's on the river though. I have an idea, I'll look at it. And
Okay.
if it's on the river, I'm pretty sure I know where it is. It has not been studied, it has not been certified as vernal.
Are there other certified vernal pools in the Bells Neck area?
There's one in the Bell's Neck, there are two in Sand Pond Woodlands, just north of there. Some of them are usually borrow pits that they got excavated pretty close down to the groundwater, so seasonally they hold water still, some of these old pits along the river.
The report also talks and gives pictures of areas that, trails on the north side of the reservoir, and which are problematic because of burning and parties and things. Not
Not so much anymore.
so much anymore. I've never been in there. So that's not an issue? There aren't,
No, the only issue on the north side, it's not as well used, south of the retention line, south of the bike trail, but north of the water. One of the main issues we've had there is there's an area where people off of a road can drive in, and essentially drive into that area out to what we call the peninsula, which is like
Right.
in the middle. So that potentially would be a gate area or heavy-duty fence area, because that's where if we have some ATVs or vehicles, that's where they can get in. It's wide enough.
and is that happening?
Not lately, we haven't gotten reports of it.
As recent as like during COVID though.
Yeah,
Ah.
within the past couple of years.
Mr. Chairman, per the wetland map, the vernal pool is on the west end of Sand Pond, in between the Han River and the west end.
That's the certified
one that
mapped
isn't
ones.
certified.
There's an area that's not
Oh.
mapped yet. Hasn't been declared.
What was that document you referring to, the 2011 plan?
I think it's in the 2011 management plan, either that or it's in the RFP, which wouldn't make a lot of sense. There's a table with a whole list of potential vernal pools
We have
that
that, yeah.
not yet certified, most of them were categorized, but there were two actual vernal pools that I think were certified and one that was being considered at the time.
Yeah, those maps will only show ones that BSC,
certified.
this is certified already with the state.
Okay, well, I think I'll stop there. So, aside from determining a next meeting, are there other things that people want to discuss before we're done here today? Have we done enough here today?
I think it's been great. I think it's a good discussion. I would just ask you as chair to set a schedule. You can decide when you want comments to come back, and so I'd like
Right.
to see some firms scheduled to all this.
Right, so would I. So I suggest in no more than 1 month from today, we find another time, and it be a separate time from our regular Wednesday evening meetings. I-
Friday, February 24th.
What is that big sound house?
Friday,
Afternoon.
To meet or to have comments back?
To meet.
To meet,
So, comments a week before.
which is less than a month, so I don't know if that squeezes anybody with school vacation. I'm okay with that myself, but
2 o'clock?
I may be
Same
away
thing,
that
2 o'clock?
weekend, so.
Friday, February 24th, 2 o'clock.
Comments a week prior,
Right.
the 17th.
is everyone okay with that? It's fairly quick.
We're not
Yeah, I'm
gonna,
fine
we're
with
not
it.
gonna make progress unless we
All right,
push.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, rock and roll.
I think we'll go quickly, and if I could make one more comment on your point on the species list.
It won't affect us.
I thought we wouldn't have to contract that, and if we had a lot of expertise around the table. So if people look at a particular list of class of flora, fauna, and want to dig into it, that'd be a good little side task maybe for people. So that's one way to handle that. Just review it and think closely of any species that might be missing.
Who decides what is invasive plant?
So the state has a list, if you look out, Massachusetts Massachusetts invasive plants, there's a list of state listed invasives. We have other ones that locally we consider aggressive, which maybe we could do a whole other category for those, like ones we wouldn't recommend that somebody plant, even though they're not prohibited.
My concern is the Rosa multiflora. That is an incredible bee magnet. And there's a big concern worldwide about, bees, decline in bee
Yeah.
populations. And I just think it's crazy to eliminate a plant that they thrive on. They love, when mine are in bloom, I only got a couple of small ones around. Things are loaded with bees when they're in bloom.
Yeah. There are other plants that are not, they don't completely outcompete other plants that are good for bees, though. Maybe we can promote those.
That plant's not good for bees?
Huh?
That plant's not good for bees?
No, it is.
Oh.
I'm not
But it's
disagreeing with
listed by the
Wayne,
state.
but it is, it completely, it'll take over an area.
Right,
and
chokes out other
Oh,
stuff.
as far as
Chokes out other
invasive, I got,
species.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not, it's like Rosa Sharon. It's great for bees. Invasive.
Rosa Sharon is invasive?
Well, it's not
They sell it in the
state listed.
nurseries?
It's not state listed yet, but it should be.
It's not yet,
Not yet.
so it isn't invasive
Well,
yet.
you know that, I mean, like, what happens is you plant one
Oh,
and
yeah,
a million other
absolutely,
sprouts
yeah, they
come
do.
up.
Well, that's
It's
My
true
neighbors
with-
were really mad when I ripped mine out, though.
That's true with multiflora rose too, because they suck her out, and the
Yeah.
birds eat the
Yeah.
And
hips
the
and
bees are
drop
happy
the
as hell.
seed.
Yeah. Lots of other pollinator-friendly plants that we're encouraging, so.
And sometimes.
Do you have a list
it's
of
sad 'cause they're good to
pollinator-friendly
We do.
plants? Do you?
I'd be happy, we have
Yeah, I would
actually
like
a
to see it,
native,
'cause-
we have a native list,
Because I like to
That's
plant
very-
that stuff for the bees.
all incorporating everything from trees down to grasses, forbs, wildflowers for you.
All right, I look forward to
Actually, I want
receiving
to
it.
look at that list, because I would like your input on
Any
that.
additions?
It's a working
Always
list, we're
growing
always
it, we always
changing.
grow.
So, sorry, back to what Brad was saying, can you repeat what you were asking for us to look at the list in this document?
In the 2012 plan, there was a list of species presence,
Got it.
table form, and there's, different insects and plants and birds and things. There's no fish, so I'd like to volunteer for that. But I think,
There are,
is there a fish list?
there's
Yeah.
invertebrates and vertebrates, both
Okay.
in there.
Maybe I can update it, but I think it would be helpful, because last time that was contracted out, and there's a ton of people here that know a lot about these things, maybe different people can volunteer to dig in, if that's practical. Do you think you can list those, Amy, without a formal survey? And just based on
Yeah.
local
Well,
knowledge?
like, we're walking around and we see, oh, that's here.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
that's
that,
fine.
I'm fine with that. So that's the idea there, is to have people volunteer and maybe take on a list and just, steer that through, come back at the next subcommittee meeting or whatever we're calling this and present results and finalize things. Save a few bucks that way too.
Uh-huh. Okay,
I'll make a motion, we adjourn this sub-meeting.
Okay.
Second, yeah.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.